Hello and welcome back to the stars, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Novablast Disruptor in Starfield. This is technically the only EM weapon in the game, at least that is not modified into an EM weapon. Certain shotguns can have like EM slugs in it, and other weapons can also be modified to have like EM lasers on them, like the Equinox that we talked about in an earlier video. This one is just dedicated to being a non-lethal weapon. And that makes it kind of hard to assess as a weapon in the tier list, but I'm going to try my best. So the Novablast Disruptor you're probably going to find towards the mid-game, usually around level 30 or so is to when I found a whole bunch of people carrying it around with them, especially Zealots. Zealots like this one a lot. And if they shoot you with it, it actually does permanent total health damage. So rather than actually just doing damage to you like regular bullets do, or nails, or whatever the heck you're getting hit by do, this one actually takes away your total amount of health, so you can't heal up to that point. So if you get hit with this enough, it can actually take up a huge chunk of your bar. I don't think I've ever had it happen to me like that, but I have had other effects throughout the world have that happen to me. Specifically, swimming around in heavy metal water did that to me, and made it so I had like 10% of my total health bar when I was exploring a planet, and that was a little bit sketchy. This one does something similar, at least when you get hit. When you hit enemies with this, at least human enemies, or living creatures I should say, then it will build up an EM bar. Once this bar is completely maxed out, this will immobilize the target. This does not kill them, but it does knock them unconscious, essentially. So let's go over the base stats of the Novablast Disruptor. And for base stats, this one actually does do 100 EM damage, which is good, I guess. EM damage is not really the same as regular damage, but it does make it so the bar builds up faster of knocking enemies out. So 100 EM damage is pretty decent, especially compared to other weapons that you might convert to EM. This one uses the heavy particle fuse. It's this one, the Inflictor, and the Big Bang that use that. And this one I would say is the less of the three of those in terms of overall combat effectiveness. Unless you're trying to be a pacifist, in which case then this one is the best one because you're not killing people. This one holds 5 rounds in it, which is kind of weird. I wish it would hold more. The reload is also kind of slow in it for some reason. I don't know why that is. I feel like this one should at least have an extended mag or be able to reload a little bit quicker with some of its mods, but apparently there's nothing really that does that. This one has a 20 round rate of fire, although rate of fire doesn't really matter with this one because this is another weapon that you can charge up. You can shoot this fairly fast, but shooting it one at a time at an enemy doesn't usually knock them out unless they're a lower leveled enemy, or it counts as like a sneak attack because that still builds up the EM damage more. But holding this down, it will charge it up. There is, I guess, kind of an apparent way to see that it's charged, and that's your person will just start shaking with it, which I don't really like. I wish there was a bar that actually like filled up when it was charged, so that way you kind of know. You can kind of tell by the crosshairs because they will become tighter, but I don't think that that's a great way of actually like showing that to the player. This does have 20 meters of effective range, which is fine for a non-lethal weapon like this. It has high accuracy, although it is kind of weird because the accuracy isn't actually that great with it, at least when you're ADSing, because with your person shaking, it kind of moves the front sights, so you do have to account for more sway with this weapon than basically any other weapon. Most weapons are just point and click, and this weighs 2.7 in total weight, which isn't too heavy. You can carry quite a few of these around, and they are actually worth a decent amount of money. This is also one of the few weapons that doesn't actually have any sort of tier to it as well, so it is always just the Novablast Disruptor, and it's just stuck at that, similar to the arc welder, the cutter, or the rivet gun. It doesn't have an advanced version, doesn't have a refined version, it's just the base version of what it is, which is perfectly fine for a weapon like this. That really doesn't matter since you're not going to be using this as a dedicated weapon in terms of just dealing a whole bunch of damage. You're going to be using this for opportunistic abilities, or you're going to be using this in like a dedicated pacifist run, which is already a challenge run, and this at least gives you something to do with it, so that's better than just not using your weapons altogether. Now for the general pros of the Novablast Disruptor, it is non-lethal, so that is a pro if you're doing a pacifist run. That might be a con if you're not doing a pacifist run, and it usually has one-hit KOs if you hit a sneak attack, which is pretty good. This also gives you some unique advantages, and we'll talk about that in a second with the utility of this. For the cons of this, it does basically no damage, so you can't kill things with this, at least easily. You can repeatedly knock something out and then smack it with the butt of the gun. I tried that a couple of times in some of these clips, and it kind of works, but not really. The mag size is also very small. I don't really like that. I wish it would hold maybe double the amount of ammo. Holding 10 shots would be perfect for this type of weapon. Holding 5, I just don't feel like is enough for a lot of situations where you're going to be kind of using this in a combat role, and it is also non-lethal, which again, could be a pro or a con depending on how you like to play. If you're just trying to be the most efficient, go through things the fastest, kill things the quickest, this weapon is absolutely terrible and it belongs into D tier. And I put it there in my recent rifle tier list. I wasn't actually aware you could charge it up at that time though, and that does give it more utility though. So honestly, I don't know if I would put it into D tier, because if you're just going to be using this as a tool, and it really should just get its own tier of utility option, and it should just be like the top pick there, because this thing fluctuates heavily depending on how you want to use it and how you want to play. If you're just trying to kill things quickly and efficiently, then yeah, this one is garbage and it is D tier. You shouldn't use it for any reason other than just to sell it, because every other weapon can kill much faster than this. On the other hand though, if you're doing a pacifist run, this thing is S tier, because it allows you to actually do stuff. It allows you to actually kind of fight during combat and knock people out, which can be pretty useful, especially if you don't want to kill people. And that can be really useful during all sorts of quests. And if you're going to be using this to train certain skills, this one can actually be kind of decent too. It's kind of a weird one. So yeah, the Novablast Disruptor, I guess I'm going to put it into D tier in terms of combat. But keep in mind, there is a big asterisk right next to that because of the utility that it does give you. Now let's talk about a modified version, then we'll go over the various utility options that this one offers. So starting out the barrel, we either have the standard barrel or the long barrel. You might as well go with the long barrel, it gives you longer range. The only problem is slower ADS speed, which doesn't matter, because I use this one in close range to knock people out, and I'm not usually trying to actively fight them. Most of the time I'm sneaking around and knocking people out, so just having better range is a better option. For a laser sight, you either have the regular laser or the recon. Both are good, pick whichever one you'd like. Recon laser is technically the better option, but not by that much. Then for optics, we can actually put a scope on this, interestingly enough, and I would recommend putting the short scope on this, because this does actually count towards the sniper perk. So you can build up EM a little bit better on longer range targets. The scope is really weird though. It's probably one of my least favorite overall scopes. If you don't like that, you could always go with the reflex sight or the glow sights. Both of them are fine too. I just usually throw the scope on here so we can get a little bit more damage on this weapon. And damage should be in like quotations, because this just knocks people out quicker, maybe. Unless you're hitting sneak shots. Then for a muzzle, you can either go with the focal lens, or you can go with the focus nozzle. The focal lens makes so you have better accuracy, which is pretty cool. I went with the focus nozzle so we can get a little bit more damage, a little bit more headshot damage. I did notice this one actually helping quite a bit when I was trying to knock people out, at least that had already seen me. If I'm stealthed and hit somebody, then it doesn't really matter. Either one is fine. And then for an internal, I went with overclock to increase the rate of fire. This doesn't really seem to increase the charge speed, at least I didn't notice it. If it is, it's slightly. But it does make it so if people do see me and I need to follow up on a few shots where I've knocked them maybe 3/4 the way to being knocked out, then I can hit them 1 or 2 more times and fully knock them out. I like that over the amplifier, but the amplifier would build that up a little bit quicker, so you might end up needing less shots. Pick whichever one of these you'd like to. They're both pretty decent. And for this, I would basically keep it in the same tier that the Novablast Disruptor without any mods is. This doesn't substantially change it, and it's still a non-lethal option. It is a better non-lethal option, so that is kind of nice, but it's still a non-lethal option that's not going to be that great for actual combat use, again, if you are dedicated to killing people. Now let's talk about some of the utility of the Novablast Disruptor and what things that I've found that it can do pretty well. The first and most obvious one is if you are doing a pacifist run. This is one of the best weapons for that. You don't need to actually kill people. If people do engage on you, you actually can shoot back at them, which is nice. If you're doing a pacifist run in most of the Fallout games, or if you're doing it in Skyrim or something, you're generally just not fighting back at all and you're just running right past enemies, because that's basically the best thing you can do. There are a few other weapons, abilities, things like that that you could use in those games. Like you could put on boxing gloves in like New Vegas and just punch somebody until they're knocked out and then run away, because, you know, you're not killing them that way. And this weapon kind of fits that role, where you can still use this to run away and just keep firing at people, and if you knock them out, then they're basically out for the entire fight. Unless you're just hanging around the area for like 10 minutes at a time, they're not going to be getting back up anytime soon. There is also some skill training that you can do with the Novablast Disruptor, which I think is another big use of its utility. You can up your sneak stat with this very easy, because you can just get sneak crits on anything, and you can just keep doing this, and you're not going to be killing anybody. So that's good. You can also use it for pickpocketing, which is great. So if you need to get your pickpocketing skill up, you can. One combat technique that I have heard with this one, which I honestly don't think is a great combat technique, at least for all the things that you can do in Starfield, but one that is effective, is knock somebody out at range with this, then sneak up with a melee weapon or an unarmed weapon. I guess it's just unarmed as your hands, and then hit them. This will get you the sneak damage, and if you've built up concealment, it's also really good for building up the concealment skill, because it's kind of annoying to chase things down while trying to be like crouched and smack stuff. It's honestly not too hard though. When I was doing that previously, I could just like run right up to wildlife, crouch right behind it, and then just smack it, and I'd almost always get a sneak crit. The main problem I see with this in terms of like practical use is that it just takes a little bit too long, and it's not as efficient as just going with either a silent sniper or going with a silent shotgun. You can load up slugs and put a suppressor onto like the old Earth shotgun, and you're going to be good for any close range or even long range engagement with that. If you hit basically anything with that with a sneak crit, you're probably going to kill it or half health it at the very least. And then if you want to go even longer range, you could just go with a suppressed hard target, and you can one-shot almost anything in the game with this. At least if you built all the skills for it, it does a lot more damage than just sneak melee would. Because I think the highest you can really get with sneak melee is something like the Pain Blade, which has a base damage of 62, so it's not really that high. Yes, you can have 10 times damage on top of that, and if you go with the melee skill, then you are getting even more damage than that, but you're probably hitting around 1,000-ish damage, I would imagine. I haven't actually done the exact numbers of it, and that's just not really that high. Even if you're doing double that, it's still not that high, because you can get something like the Silent Earth shotgun over like 800 damage with slugs. And then concealment was still going to give you 4 times bonus crit damage on top of that. So you're going to go for, 2,000 damage on the Pain Blade or 3,200 damage on the shotgun. The shotgun's generally going to be a better option then. And that's not necessarily to say like shotguns are overtuned, although they are really strong in this game. It's mostly that melee is just very underutilized and very undertuned in this game. I don't know why. This is a way to make melee more effective though. So if you're going with a melee run, this one might actually be a pretty good option for that too. There's a lot of disparity with the Nova Disruptor. Tell me your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm still going to put it into D tier just because of it not really being a combat focused weapon, and if you're trying to use it for combat, it's just not really that useful, but it is still a very fun weapon to use. So there is still a big fun factor about this one, and I will talk to you guys next time. Till then, stay cool, and bye bye everyone.